Orla, thank you so much for joining me on the Transform with MG podcast today. It's been a long time coming, and I'm really excited to have you on and pick your brain on all things female health, gut health, and relationship with our bodies and food. But before I dive into that, I'd love to know a little bit about your own journey because you were a completely different person back in 2014 than where you are now. So what was some of like signals that your body was giving you if we were to go back to 2014 that made you like delve into like your health?
Yeah, 2014. I'm trying to think where was I at then? 2014, I was a very different person. I was like, oh yeah, actually, did you see the picture that I posted on Instagram? Was that where that was? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only posted that recently because yeah, I sometimes think that like I've struggled with symptoms my whole life pretty much. But things definitely worsened and heightened back then. So I would have had an eating disorder. I would have had undiagnosed IBS, undiagnosed PCOS. I would have struggled with social anxiety. I would have had unprocessed trauma. My body was just so inflamed and so swollen. I had, like, you saw that picture, my face was like just so swollen. I look like a completely different person. It's like a completely different structure in my face almost. My skin was so dry. I had patches of eczema all over it. My hair was breaking. I was a shell of myself. I'm not the bubbly, energetic, confident person that you know today. So yeah, I didn't have a period. I was exercising 5, 6 days a week, trying to socialize and burn the candle at both ends, basically, and going out on the drink on the sesh like 3 nights a week while working full time, while in college for full time. Like even just like saying that story stresses me out. I don't know how I did it.
Yeah, that's a lot. And like, so was there a trigger point for you that you were essentially, this is enough. I need to do something about it. I need to look into it and start solving those issues rather than keep on going with the way you are going. And obviously, things were just getting worse and worse for you. Was there a point where you're like, okay, let's look into it, let's try and solve it?
Yeah, there definitely was. There was definitely moments. So I didn't know, and I'm still learning a lot about my body and a lot about the conditions that I have, because a lot of the conditions I've been diagnosed with or the symptoms that I've had that were like random at the time, they're only being like the dots are only being connected now. And even like back then, if you looked up what IBS was, there was nothing about the gut brain connection. There was nothing about the nervous system and mental health and emotions and stress and relationship with food. It was all to do with, oh, don't like when I was diagnosed, I had a colonoscopy and then it was like, don't drink coffee, don't have chocolate, take some laxatives, you'll be fine. I was not fine. So yeah, so there was lots of stages along my journey where finally like it was like I had breakthrough moments or light bulb moments where I was like, wow, I found it. This is what's wrong with me. And I had that for many years. And this is what a lot of my clients experience is like they're trying to find what's wrong with them. They're trying to fix themselves. They feel so broken. They feel so helpless. So yeah, I would have first started off with digestion. And then I thought, this is it. This solved everything for me. Unfortunately, it didn't. Then there was a kind of an evolution where I focused on regaining my period. And at the same time, that would have helped with my relationship with food as I was eating more, helped with my body image as I was feeling better. And yeah, there was rock bottoms. 100%. There was a lot of rock bottom moments for me, with depression as well. But I think it was very much a stage or like yeah, a few moments along the journey that would have been turning points for me because I am such a complex being with my health.
So to touch on the digestion part, it was IBS that you first discovered you had in terms of actually being properly clinically diagnosed. So for anyone listening that doesn't know IBS and is maybe struggling with digestive issues with their gut health, can you explain what it is and how did you come about to finding out it was actually IBS and not maybe food trigger?
Yeah, for sure. IBS was diagnosed basically through a colonoscopy. So back then it was just you get ruled, so you get diagnosed by ruling everything else out, anything more sinister. So like inflammatory bowel disease ran in my family, so they did the diagnostic tests of the colonoscopy just to make sure that that wasn't inflammatory bowel disease because they're quite different. And then At the time, there was no research, there wasn't anything to support. There was like FODMAP diets and all this kind of stuff. So I really had to just take the reins myself. So that's really how the Health Hun started. That's how I'm able to help as many people as I can because I know so much of this inside out myself. And then I eventually got the qualification. So yeah, there was a lot of years of struggle along the way, but IBS is essentially a gut brain disorder. It is to do with, and a lot of people will just focus on the food aspect, right? So it is to do with food that can stimulate, I say a trigger. People would know to call it a trigger food, I suppose. But sometimes it's not just about what you eat, it's about how you eat, right? And people are in such a state of fear with their relationship with food. We came to such a good place with language and what we label food as good as bad. But more recently, there's so much shit online about like health. Kind of, it's been posed as like health conscious, but it's actually quite orthorexic in the ways that it's like obsession and fear, and people are fearful of eating anything or drinking water because it's going to cause cancer. So there's still so much out there, and I feel like it's constantly going to be evolving. So I'm always going to have a job to help people with. But yeah, so it is to do with your relationship with food, your gut brain connection. So how well rested you are, if you've got anxiety, unprocessed trauma, your mood, your emotions, and then the language. So the language that you use around your food can determine how safe or unsafe you feel, right? And that might sound like a bit of a dramatic word for some people, being like, of course, I feel safe around food, but does it create such anxiety and distress in your body that you get overwhelmed and you shift into your fight or flight? That's kind of what I mean by safe there. There are aspects to do with your gut motility. So some people have I suppose, high speed with gut motility, and it might be more like diarrhea, or it might be quite slow and it might be more like constipation. Then we also have the third component that I would focus on is to do with your gut microbiome. So a lot of people would have heard in recent years, it's all about the gut, it's all about the gut bacteria. And for sure, it's really, really important. But there's been a real overemphasis on probiotics to solve everything, or like making sure you only have clean food, or doing like cleanses and all this kind of stuff. And it is only one piece of the puzzle, and it can cause more harm than good, especially because of that gut brain aspect. So people are like doing fasting and all this bullshit, but that can actually worsen it because of the stress aspect as well. So there's a couple of pieces to the puzzle. And for anyone listening, I know it is quite distressing, and I know you might feel quite overwhelmed at this, but I promise you there are so many simple solutions you can put in place to get your system back to doing what it's meant to do naturally.
Yeah, I do agree that there's an overemphasis on probiotics. I feel like it is definitely a quick fix, but as you mentioned, it's not only down to food that somebody might be experiencing these issues, and essentially taking probiotics is like putting a plaster on a scar that needs stitches. So, what would you recommend people do to look after their gut health outside of just simply grabbing a supplement?
Yeah, so I suppose it's a really important point because a lot of clients have come to me in the past and they could be taking like, I won't name any brands, but they've taken a probiotic that's quite expensive for the last like year or two, and they still have no digestive issue resolution, right? So it isn't what's going to cure people as it's been sold. And again, that's all marketing really, right? But essentially you could be taking all of the right things. You're adding them in. That's what probiotics is adding in the good bacteria. But if you're not creating an environment for them to grow and to thrive and to actually settle there, right? You're just adding fuel to a fire, or you're adding, I suppose what the way I describe it is like if your system is on fire, right? If you think about like an inflamed gut, IBS symptoms, digestive issues, the way I describe that is like it's a fire. And for you to be able to try and figure out what is wrong with it, or to find the trigger food, we have to put the fire out first. Because if you throw a lot of flammable things into a fire, into like an area or like a gas, they'll go up in flames, right? But we can't see that. If you throw non-flammable things into a fire and there's already a fire, everything's gonna go up on fire. So we've got to kind of put that out first, which means lowering inflammation, which means managing your gut brain connection, which means helping you feel safe with your nervous system as well. And then we're having a look at the food. So, what food are you including? There's such a focus or a fear, I suppose, of like what foods is causing the issue. So, it creates this like very small list of foods that they feel that they can tolerate, especially if people get intolerance tests and so on, which anyone listening, do not get them. They're a scam. They're just a waste of money. They've been disproven medically and scientifically. So, do not get them. But from there, people have this fear of like, okay, well, I've just eaten this meal. This is what's creating my digestive issue. It's quite like a logical thing that we think we're doing when it actually shrinks the list of foods that we think we can cope with. And again, restricts further restriction in your relationship with food. We actually want to reframe that altogether and see, okay, well, what foods can I include? Am I incorporating enough diversity to support growing those gut microbes? Am I incorporating in enough fiber to help with my gut motility? There's so many different ways to look at this. And they say that you're meant to be getting, you hear eat the rainbow. You're meant to be getting like 32, I think it is, diverse ranges of fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, seeds, etc. over the course of the week to try and make up to support all those polyphenols. And, there's a lot of focus on macronutrients, but it's like those micronutrients is what's really important for your gut health as well. And yeah, and also this can be the tricky place as well, is like some of those fiber types can actually be triggers for IBS. So this is where it can get a bit complex. So for anyone listening, I wouldn't advise doing it on your own because you don't really know what you're looking at. And then that creates that what's called the nocebo effect. Have you ever heard of that before?
No, no, what is it?
So the nocebo effect is kind of what I've just explained there. Like it's really about how you can create a state of distress based on what's happening. So you've heard of the placebo effect, whereas like we can take a drug and it might just be a sugar solution, and someone can convince themselves that it is the cure and it's after creating this miracle for them when it's actually not even a drug in it, right?
Mm.
They've found that the opposite is true with even like gluten and dairy specifically, where they've put people in a group. Some people had gluten and some people had dairy, and they had symptomatic reactions, right? Because people get reactions to them if they've got some sort of allergy response or intolerance, right, or sensitivity. And they've actually then shown the group of people that were not taking any gluten or dairy, it was like again a sugar or salt solution, and they convinced themselves that that was what they had taken, and they still had those physical symptoms manifest. And this is the impact of stress, right? This is the impact of stress. And I've been there. I've literally been in that place where I'm so overwhelmed by all of this that I'm trying to find the answer. I'm trying to find the fix. I'm trying to find the cure. And I'm like, there must be something that I can't see. And we can't see the amount of distress that we're in. So it's really about taking that step back, like getting support from someone, because they can literally hold your hand through the process and doesn't have to feel like you're, going through it basically.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned stress and nervous system regulation because this is something that I definitely missed, and I actually didn't even consider it to be a factor in terms of why I always felt bloated or why my period was missing. And I was getting all these symptoms until I was like, okay, maybe that there is something outside of just the day-to-day basics. Like, for example, bloating. I was that woman that was, okay, I eat in a meal, I feel shit. Like it must be the meal, it must be the food that I'm eating, rather than taking like a bird's eye view of my whole lifestyle on what is actually happening. So talk to me about how stress impacts us and maybe the impact of stress outside of physical ones, such as like work stress or college stress or family life, things like unresolved trauma for such. How does that impact us both physically and mentally?
Yeah, so there's quite a good few um I suppose avenues with this, but I suppose to simplify it, so we've got like our states of our nervous system, right? And we've got people will probably have heard of the term fight or flight. We've got like our baseline level where, you and me are sitting here and we're having a chat and we're feeling nice and open and comfortable and confident and connected, right? And we're not feeling this kind of fear between each other. Well, actually, I know some people on podcasts might actually feel that. So, but you know what I mean. But yeah, so the other state of your nervous system that you can shift into, right? It's not your natural state of being, but for some people it has been because they're quite chronically stressed, right? So that fight or flight that they shift into. Also the fawn, which is like your people pleasing, feeling like there's something wrong with me, I must fix people or help people feel better in order to make me feel better, securing myself. The fight can be more so like explosive, aggressive, reactive, whereas the flight might be like, avoidance, suppression, running away from your emotions, running away from your problems, etc. Right. So regardless of like how that shows up, that is a state that you've shifted into. And that can be from you're sitting in your room now, that could be from a pen dropping and you're like, oh my God, is there someone in the house? And then there's not actually anyone in the house. Or it could be, as women, we have to fear our safety, unfortunately, in these times at the minute. And it could just be we're walking down the road at night and there is actual potential danger or threat. So we are on guard, you're hyper vigilant, you're in this state of your nervous system that is ready to fight or flight or flee, right? So that is not something that just happens. Sorry, that's something that just happens. It's not something that happens consciously. You can't choose whether you're going to go into it or not, right? So for some people, unfortunately, it's so subconscious or it's so hardwired and it's been patterns over years that it does take like coaching, therapy, counseling, whatever, with qualified trauma practitioners to be able to bring you out of that and give you the tools to cope. So I won't go into that too much. Just at the minute, I'll keep it general on stress. Unless you want me to go into it afterwards. But just with stress, in those moments that you shift, you will have a secretion of cortisol and adrenaline, and those are our stress hormones. And they will shift things like your heart rate, your breathing, your digestion, right? Literally, your blood flow gets diverted like in different directions to help you flee or do what you need to do. Different areas of the brain are activated as well. So your irrational survival brain is activated in that moment. You're not able to think logically or clearly. And that's what people think that they're doing. They think that they're like, well, actually, some people are very aware that they said something in an argument that they didn't actually mean to say. And they're like, what was that? I don't know why I acted that way. That's your fight or flight, right? Whereas some people, think they're being rational and think they're being logical, or they know what they should be doing, right? This is a huge thing I'm seeing a lot of the time with clients. I know I should be doing this. I know this isn't something that I wanted to do, but it's like I can't bring my body on board with my mind. That is to do with your nervous system. And that has a lot to do with safety, stress, certainty, unfamiliarity, overwhelm, all of the above. And the way I describe stress is like if you think about we've got stress like a bucket, right? And it's like we've got this specific capacity that we can cope for in any one given moment in time. So think about that. It's called your window of tolerance. It's not really necessary to remember, but I use a stress bucket because people can kind of relate to that, right? We want to be able to like pull back on that like overflow, or we want to be having a little bit of room at the top. So when shit does hit the fan in life, it kind of fills up to the top and we're still able to cope. We're not overflowing, we're not having a meltdown. It's not really affecting our health as well, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people are literally just keeping their head above water. They're at the top or they're overspilling. And that is where we see this chronic buildup of stress and how it impacts the body. That chronic cortisol floating around your body does have a knock-on impact with your hormones. It has almost instantaneous effects with your digestion. It can also have an instantaneous effect with your cravings, right? It can change what foods that you seek. So yeah, it's just really about understanding. And I'm so glad that this has become something that people are so much more interested in learning about, because it really helps with compassion, right? If you understand what is going on in your body, if you understand the states in your nervous system, you get to actually meet yourself where you're at and not be an asshole to yourself, not judge yourself, not be like expect too much and put too much pressure on yourself. And what I'm seeing is this beautiful shift in clients of like being able to connect to themselves and yeah, just being connected to their body, being a friend to themselves and being able to help themselves move through things and feeling all that empowered as well.
And what are some of the common things that you see people are doing that are putting themselves into that fight or flight mode?
So it's not that people are putting themselves into it. It's like the way that our world is at the minute, right? There's so much pressure. Like anyone I talk to, people are so stressed about our generation. Like we're so different. So like I'm 29. So I'm in the generation of friends are starting to have babies and get engaged or have houses. And then I've got other friends who are single and don't know where they're going to live next month and don't know what jobs to do and what visas. And it's just chaos. Whereas we compare ourselves to our parents' generation, they had all of that. Like it was quite like routine for them. Um, couple that with, I suppose if you think about like dating and relationships, people are in their fight or flight as well. We're the generation as well that we weren't taught how to process our emotions. So we're all feeling quite unsafe or explosive or shutting down and being quite self-defensive and self-protective. So there's so many different things that can contribute to us. Also, like COVID, we're all still dealing with socializing after COVID, wars, everything. There's so much shit that can contribute to you feeling safe or unsafe in that one given moment in time. And then also your health. So if you're not looking after your sleep, right, you're going to be more susceptible to being more irritable to begin with. If you have inflammation in your body, that's going to create that start baseline level of stress for you as well. If you're under eating, if you're over exercising, if you're under exercising, there's so many layers to which can contribute to that stress bucket for you. And it's about understanding, what's in your control and what's out of your control, right? So for me, what's in my control is setting up my routines and my day to day to make sure that I'm not, irritable and chaotic and like not eating properly and my blood sugars are going out of control and my digestion's out of control. I'm quite honest and I hold myself accountable and I respect my body and I respect my needs. But I could have a situation where I'm trying to think of a situation. Yeah, last year I was quite stressed because I didn't know where I was living. I didn't know where I was coming or going. So, those are things that are outside of your control sometimes. People might have a bad day in work. People might have crashed the car, touch wood. This doesn't happen to anyone listening, but something might happen there where they've got a financial burden or, there can be bigger stressors or it can be a buildup of those chronic little stressors. And those are the things that people don't really pay attention to, unfortunately.
Yeah, so what I'm understanding is there's a lot of stuff outside of our control just in the society we're living in, but on the flip side, there are definitely things that we can do to optimize it and minimize that stress as much as we can.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
going back to hormones and hormone imbalances, you were also diagnosed with PCOS. So tell me, how has that looked for you and how was that diagnosed and what methods of dealing with it were given or available to you?
Again, very similar story, not really given much help. It was just like, go on the pill. And I had come off the pill. I had come off the pill and I had all of these symptoms. So again, that was like another stage on my journey where I was like, oh my God, breakthrough. This explains why. So I had a binge eating disorder. I had multiple different types of eating disorder. So at one aspect, the binge eating was so bad because the cravings were so high and so intense, and PCOS feeds into that. If you have intense cravings because you're going through these, intense sugar highs and then these crashes because your blood sugars aren't balanced because you've got insulin resistance, that feeds into different things like your relationship with food as well. So it was like a breakthrough moment for me, but again, I wasn't given any sort of support. So it was get the detective cap on or and figure it out for yourself. A few years later, I did then obviously do my nutrition qualification and again came across research to actually help myself with that as well. But there was so much that I figured out by myself up until that point. But yeah, I'm literally the person that I needed when I was years ago. So no one has to go through that, what I've gone through. But I had come off the pill. I didn't get my period back for a year and a half afterwards. At the time, I was told, oh, be fine. It'll come back eventually. And I didn't realize that's amenorrhea and it's really bad for your health. So a year in, I decided to take the reins and like I mentioned like earlier on about like regaining my menstrual cycle also helped with my relationship with food and gaining weight and, doing it for a purpose as well gave me that push that I needed. So yeah, I had to go on the self-discovery journey of my hormones then as well, which I loved, right? I was absolutely obsessed with because I was just learning more and more about my body. And I'm just obsessed with the human body in general. But essentially there's four different types of PCOS, right? And just for anyone listening who has it or thinks they have it, it's not to get bogged down or be like, this is my type of PCOS. All four types can contribute to your PCOS at any one given moment in time. And the reason that I suppose, teach my clients about it or educate on it is more so to understand where our efforts are needed to be focused. What symptoms do you have that we need to put extra strategies in place to support that type of PCOS? Not that this is your one type that can change. It's not stagnant as well. So, for example, years ago, stress was huge for me because I was so dysregulated, everything that I've just explained there, as was inflammation because I had severely bad gut digestive issues, as was coming off the pill. So sorry, the four types are stress, inflammation, insulin resistance, and the contraceptive, hormonal contraceptives in general, not just the pill. So those are four areas that can contribute to your symptoms as such, and can have their own kind of like cluster of symptoms is the way I describe it. But there is absolutely overlap. There is also overlap with treatment, right? So when you are actually supporting yourself and looking at your diet holistically, say for example, you're optimizing something like your sleep, that doesn't just go on to support inflammation, or just doesn't go on to support stress. There's your habits and your behaviors can contribute to all of them, right? So that was something that I learned. I learned about supplements, nutrition, diet, all that kind of stuff. I was honest with myself about pulling back on stress, which had to mean looking at like things like my self-worth, trying to be an overachiever, trying to be a perfectionist, trying to be a social butterfly, all of these things as well. So yeah, it's very much mental and physical and emotional. And yeah, again, similar to IBS, there's so many simple things that you can do to support it.
And I feel like PCOS, women are just brushed under the umbrella of having PCOS by many doctors without actually, for example, if they lose their period, suddenly they get specialists telling them, oh, it must be PCOS. What are some of the symptoms that women need to have in order to actually fall under the bracket of having one of the four of the PCOS, I suppose, branches that you mentioned?
Yeah, yeah. So with diagnosis, it's not really about looking at the types, it's about the criteria. So there's a diagnostic criteria where you must meet two out of the three of those criteria. So there is absent or irregular menstruation, or absent or irregular ovulation, right? So like you said, you could have those missing cycles altogether, or you could have really long cycles or short cycles, right? So that would be one criteria, which can be masked when you're on the pill, right? So a lot of women might have the other symptoms, which I'll explain in a second, and not know that it's PCOS because they technically have a regular cycle. And that's what, unfortunately, doctors will say, go on the pill to regulate your cycle, or you're on the pill, you've got a regular cycle. It's not a real cycle. So this is just, unfortunately, I thought everyone actually knew this by now, but unfortunately, this is stuff that I'm still getting asked. Literally, women deserve so much better. So the second criteria is the clinical or biochemical appearance of hyperandrogenism, right? So hyperandrogenism is like your male characteristic hormones. So you'll either see it through blood tests or in physical symptoms. So think like hair growth around the face, facial hair, body, real dark, thick hair, or hair loss as well, right? Oily skin, different things like that. And the third one is the appearance or presence of cysts on the ovaries. So this is one to watch out for because people will go get the scan and they'll have follicles. Follicles, like a buildup of follicles, is just because you haven't been ovulating, which is normal if you're not having regular cycles or you're absent cycles altogether. So it's just to understand that that's not actually cysts. So I have actually had a client, you said, some women who have lost their period get diagnosed with PCOS. I'm actually finding some gals are coming to me and they're being diagnosed with PCOS, but they've got amenorrhea. So there definitely is a crossover between the two. And it's more so to do with looking at the blood tests, particularly your LH hormone. It'll be higher with PCOS typically, or lower with amenorrhea. You'll also see you'll see difference in symptoms as well. So you won't really get, I'll say you won't really get, but I've yet to see someone. I'm also fascinated by women's bodies, right? I see we could all eat the exact same thing, have the exact same routine, exact same supplements, and we can have different appearance of symptoms throughout the month, PMS and menstrual cycles as well. But yeah, so those symptoms of like insulin resistance is huge, but can also then be found, which will manifest as high cravings, right? High feeling like binging, low body image, different things like that can also be found in amenorrhea. So it can be difficult to spot from someone who doesn't have the education, which is unfortunately why doctors should be able to provide that for women. But it is something that if you ask the right questions, you can figure that out as well. Other inflammatory symptoms of PCOS could be like eczema. Acne is a huge one as well. And then that really messes with their confidence, digestive issues as well, fertility issues. And this is the one that grinds my gears, because just because you've got PCOS does not mean that you're infertile. And you know, that was how my diagnosis was delivered. It was like, here's the pill, go back on the pill until you want to get pregnant in a few years' time. And at the time I didn't know what was going on. And my mom was like, is she going to be able to have kids? And they were like, basically like, oh, she's going to struggle to get pregnant most likely. And it was like, I think it was like 22. And I was just like, what? I was like, obviously I don't want kids right now. But I was just like, what you mean I can't have kids? Don't tell me what I can do. I'm like, what? It was like, it just kind of spurred me on then to kind of, I don't know, prove them wrong, or just like figure out my body and get it back to what it needs to be, to where it needs to be. And what I'm seeing a lot is like clients who will go get tests done as per the doctors, or even bloody fertility clinics, and they'll come back inconclusive and they don't know why they can't get pregnant. Within working with like 3 months together, they're getting their periods back regular, they're eating the right foods, taking the right supplements, looking after all different emotional or behavioral aspects as well, and they're thriving. And it's just not the story that needs to be told anymore. It's the old outdated almost delivered like a death sentence, basically, is the way I described it. But it's really not, it's not the case.
Yeah, having people like you presenting that message that women do actually have control and then they can make a change is so important, because, you know, it is 2024 and that is the message that is portrayed by medical professionals, that here is the pill, that's your only solution, there is no answers for you, and you just kind of have to live with that for the rest of your life. And then obviously fertility is one of the concerns women are having with PCOS, but what about weight gain, weight loss? Because that is also something that many women seem to worry about when they are diagnosed with it, that they might potentially gain weight or won't be able to like change their body compositions if that's what they're interested in. So talk to me about that. Is there a connection between PCOS and weight loss, weight gain?
Yeah, for sure there is. It's to do with the metabolism, to do with insulin resistance, and then also to do with like leptin and ghrelin signaling. So you're like your hunger and fullness cues. So there's quite a few contributing factors, but I think a lot of people listening will have heard of like fast metabolism and slow metabolism, and it's not permanent. Your metabolism is transient, right? It can very much change. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing with both clients that sit in a bigger body, which would be called the kind of obese, these are not my words, the obese phenotype of PCOS, and then the lean type of PCOS. Where I actually sit on that is, I feel when you're too much into one category or the other. So if you're too overweight or too underweight as well, right? And again, we've got diet culture, leanness is just celebrated when it can actually really fuck up your symptoms. So for me, when I'm in hot countries, I don't know about you when you're in Bali, but when I was in Bali, I had to really work on my appetite. I had to really kind of make myself eat more, like smoothies, for example. I had to really try and get a smoothie, I had loads of calories into it, because otherwise, with how the heat affected me, I would have lower appetite. What happens then? I begin losing weight. What happens then? My PCOS symptoms worsen. So it's really about it's such a distressing topic for some women, because I'll have clients who will just continue to go back to the gynecologist or the endocrinologist or the GP. They're like, we're on the scales again. Oh, still haven't lost weight. You're still a piece of shit. That's the experience that they get. And I haven't had a client say, a doctor say you're a piece of shit, but I've had really fucking bad things. And I used to take note of them. If anyone wants to go listen to my medical gaslighting podcast, to get pissed off and riled up, you can go listen to that one. But yeah, they have this real shameful experience, right? And then what does that do? It creates further reinforces the belief that I can't change and there's nothing I can do. Instead of being like, right, this is what's going on with your hormones, this is what's going on with your metabolism, this is what's going on with your diet. Let's put the solutions in place, solution focused, rather than keeping them stuck in their pain or their story, or like, this is just my condition and this is always how it's going to be. So your metabolism is going to be massively impacted by chronic dieting, right? So your metabolism will, as people will understand, slow down. And unfortunately, those that are in a bigger body with PCOS will feel they're like pigeonholed with that, right? Because it's like, I want to lose weight and I'm trying to cut calories, but they can cut their calories so low that their metabolism has adapted to that, right? So the way I describe it is your metabolism is at a certain rate. And if you, how do I describe this without having my chart? I always have a little chart when I'm running through this. But your metabolism is at a certain rate, right? And if you're not eating the amount of calories to provide that, the energy coming in versus your energy output, right? If you're like doing a whole load of steps and you're doing a whole load of exercise and you're kind of restricting your food, right? That can create a calorie deficit. But unfortunately, that calorie deficit, if it's done in too much of an extreme approach, or if it's done so chronically over time, which a lot of that is for a lot of people who are underweight, they're actually under eating, right? And I'm so fucking sick of the messages online. It's just like, just be in a calorie deficit, just eat less, just what's that one? Eat less, move more, all this kind of shit. And it's like the gaslighting, it's just like the shame, and it's just creating so much issues for people who actually find it difficult to lose weight because of their metabolism. And this just forces them into like, I don't deserve to eat, right? I don't deserve to eat or reward myself, or I must punish myself. And that further worsens the stress, it further worsens the inflammation, it further worsens their metabolism. So it's about really, again, I could rant about this for days, but as a society, changing how we judge people and, not judging a book by their cover. We literally do not know what's going on in someone's body. But as someone that is dealing with it, when we actually come out of that diet culture lens, when we put a pause on losing weight for a sec, right? And this doesn't mean that you have to go in the opposite way and gain like 50 stone. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. It's more so about like this never ending strive, or this never ending life goal of losing weight is pulling you back, because you're always going to deprioritize health in the process. And when we shift the focus towards health, weight loss can happen as a byproduct of that, because your body's natural metabolism is where it needs to be. The stress is lower, the inflammation is lower. And then your body can come out of that kind of danger zone with PCOS and start to focus on a goal like weight loss as well.
Yeah, I used to have such a black and white view of fitness when I initially started off. My goal was to be small and skinny, again, because of the message that's portrayed in today's society. But I thought that it's all about eating less and moving more without considering all the other factors that go into it, and looking more into how complex the female body is. And as you mentioned, you're so fascinated with it, and so am I. And knowing that you can actually alter so many habits in a positive way, that body composition is going to be a byproduct of it, and you're going to improve your wellness and like how you're feeling mentally as well. But going back to the pill, you said that you thought many people knew that the pill, being on the pill, is not having a real period. I actually didn't know until I became a health coach myself that when I was put on the pill at the age of 16, I thought I was great. I was having regular cycles. My period came at the same day each month, lasted for 3 to 4 days, and there was no irregular. It was not irregular, but essentially that's what I'm trying to say, until I came off it, and then my period didn't come back and I was shocked. So what is it about the pill that it's not actually a proper cycle and it's not a proper period that women are getting?
So if you think about it as a withdrawal bleed, so when you actually take that break from the pill, your body is having a withdrawal bleed from the drug. So we've got natural, so outside of the pill, we've got natural fluctuations in our menstrual cycle throughout the month. So we've got a rise of estrogen in the follicular phase, and we'll have a rise in progesterone if you ovulate. And if you make enough progesterone in the luteal phase, you'll also have some estrogen, and there's other hormones in there like FSH and LH as well, right? So we have these natural rhythms, these rise and these falls, all in that 24-hour window. There can be different amounts. The pill, what it essentially does is suppress that, right? It suppresses the whole thing to give you a certain dose depending on what's in the pill. So you're not actually able to experience your own natural hormones. It's this like sustained release of synthetic versions, and they're not identical. So you can actually have issues if you take progestin, right? So progesterone is our natural hormone and progestin is the synthetic form. And some people are actually getting like PCOS-like symptoms from being on progestin pills, especially progestin only without that estrogen as well. So it's not even helping people, and it's creating more distress, and it's creating more symptoms and more issues. What I always say is I used to be this angry gal who was just always like, the pill is shit, the pill's ruining lives, and da 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 da. But what I've come to around a more rational conclusion is if the pill suits you, you are on it for contraceptive reasons. You aren't on it because you're told you need to be on it for your hormones or for your health or to fix any sort of issue like that. Power to you, sis. If you feel like it doesn't affect you, it's a choice you're making from alignment, not from fear or because you feel like you have to. Go for it. Like absolutely go for it. No shame in it, right? Versus if you are like myself, that I was told my only treatment for PCOS was to go on the pill, even though I knew I came off it because it didn't suit my body. It really messed with my mental health. It made me feel so low. I had no sex drive. I was just a shell of myself, but I was still told at that time, that's your only option, basically. That's the only thing you can do to help yourself. If I listened at that time, I wouldn't have been where I am today, essentially. So I just really want to advise people just to make decisions from that aligned place and not from that place of fear, really. But yeah, so what happens is it suppresses our hormones to suppress ovulation, right? So essentially, conception happens with a sperm and an egg. A little science lesson was basically we want to suppress that and prevent that from happening to prevent conception. So we have to suppress the hormones that are released with that. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the noise outside. We want to suppress that essentially to prevent that from happening, which is the whole aspect of it being a contraceptive pill. Yeah, so that's what happens.
Say if I'm having really painful periods and they're so irregular and it's really just preventing me living my day-to-day life and enjoying life the way I should, and the only solution I'm being presented with is the pill. What should I know and how to go about it if I want to make the most informed choice that is best for me?
So first of all, I would say that you don't need to go on the pill for painful periods. It's to do with, things like magnesium deficiency, things like inflammation, potentially undiagnosed endometriosis. There are so many women getting diagnosed in late stages of their life with endometriosis, only finding out because they've had miscarriages and different things like that, or are finding out that they're infertile. So it's not something to just, yes, it's a symptom that we don't enjoy, but it's something to be investigated and supported because it doesn't exist in isolation, right? So it's getting rid of that symptom. And this is how the medical system works. It's really about symptom management, firefighting the symptoms. Even me, I had insomnia and it was right, take sleeping tablets. I had constipation, take laxative. I was painful periods, go on the pill. And it's none of that was actually getting to the root of my issues. None of that was actually resolving and removing the causing factors of those symptoms. So that's really what I would say to people. To begin with, what was your question?
Yeah, in terms of if that's all they're being presented with is the pill, what actions to take to make the most informed choice rather than, I suppose, thinking that is their only solution.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, basically, I suppose I've answered that there, that it's not your only option, plain and simple. So, if that's the reason for going on the pill, it's not the only thing. So working with a hormone specialist like myself or anyone else can be able to help you with that, plain and simple. There's no shame on some people they're in college and they've got stressful jobs and they're in a period of their life where they don't have the capacity to focus on their nutrition or their health or whatever. Sometimes we just have these phases of life. And if you need to go on the pill then for that as well, again, make that decision for yourself. So that could be more so alignment. But yeah, I hope that answers that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And about shame, I'm so happy that periods, menstrual cycle, hormones are spoken about more because when I was first diagnosed, well, I actually wasn't even diagnosed with HA, but I didn't have my period. I didn't tell anyone for 2 years because I was so ashamed. I was like, that's not okay. I was into fitness. I was posting fitness content, content, but myself, I was in like a definition of health, and I felt like so ashamed that I don't have it, that I didn't tell anyone. Like my mother only knew because I was going back and forward to doctors. But now I feel it is, although like it's still kind of taboo, but it definitely is spoken about more so now with the rise of like Instagram and health coaches like yourself, and portraying that message and breaking down the barriers. Then like, yeah, it's important for people to know it's nothing to be ashamed of, whatever like problems that they're having to do with hormones or their female health. But I actually, when I first lost my period, and like as bad as this sounds, I was kind of delighted that I didn't have it, because it was like an inconvenience that came once a month. But that's because I was so ignorant to why having a period is not just a bleed. Like there's so much more to it. So what would you say to somebody that doesn't have it, and it's not, hasn't really looked into it or considered it to be concerning? What has the menstrual cycle and the role of it on our body?
So yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. We're so hardwired to think it's this inconvenience that comes once a month and ruins our life, right? It's literally what we're taught in schools. Like I remember when we were taught in schools, it was like learning about pads, and we were like, ew, oh my God, can't believe, like it was just such an embarrassing thing, or like a thing of like, just suck it up. This is what you have to deal with, a rite of passage as a woman, instead of like educating on how we can support our bodies. It's just crazy. But yeah, for anyone who has HA or missing periods, not to put fear in your mind, but the problem with HA is like a lot of people, they will be in such a, like what you were there as well, and I was the same. Your whole identity and worth is wrapped up in fitness and in getting leaner, right, and looking a certain way. So you don't really give a shit about your body. You don't really give a shit about your hormones. You don't really care about the sacrifices that you're making because of what you're striving for. Because, and this is where mental health support comes in and your nervous system comes in, because you are disconnected from yourself, right? And you're still chasing this thing because you're feeling out of control within yourself. And what people don't realize is your body composition isn't actually supported when you have no menstrual cycle, right? If you're in such a high state of distress, your body composition isn't supported. And also, regardless of how lean you get, I don't know if you had this, but I got so lean. But I was so fucking depressed. Like I got myself to a point where I did this 8-week challenge, and this was like going to be the tip of the iceberg, get me finally to the condition I wanted to be. And that was a rock bottom moment for me. I was so fucking miserable because I was attaching this outcome, this happiness, this validation, this worth, this high, that life is going to, like everything was just going to be solved once I reached this point. And I felt so low in myself. And that was the breakthrough moment for me to understand that it doesn't matter what my body looks like, I'm not going to feel good within. Your hormones, your estrogen, your progesterone, they provide you with energy, strength, confidence, zest for life, nourishment, anti-anxiety. You know, when they're working, when you prioritize those, you actually feel good within. Instead of chasing whatever it is externally that you're chasing, you can actually tap into that yourself. And I just think that's the most empowering thing to think of. And then there's also obviously the aspects of like you can end up with osteoporosis when you're older. You can have cardiac issues as well. There are health concerns to not having a menstrual cycle. It's not just a case of, oh, well, yeah, it doesn't really matter. I'm pain free anyways. You can get your cycle back and you can get it to a place that's pain free. It is possible, believe it or not. Yeah, it's just, I suppose with those with HA, there tends to be that the need for that coaching emotionally and mentally as well, because of what is being abandoned in place of having that menstrual cycle too.
Yeah, and then drawing in on the relationship with our bodies and food. You developed an eating disorder. You obviously got super lean. You realized that that wasn't where the pot of gold was, and it actually didn't bring you confidence and happiness. But how did all that come about initially? Where did it start that you started to be in hyper focused on your body and food in like a toxic way?
To be honest, it started very young for me. So I was like 8 years old when I remember throwing my sandwiches out in school. Yeah. So what I've learned is that I'm neurodivergent and I have like sensory issues. So I think from a very young age, Now, I was also watching America's Next Top Model when I was younger too, right? But I don't think that started until after that. You know, my family is like the traditional, like my mom's generation is like about you can't like you can only have foods when you're being treated or when you're being good and it's being taken away when you're punished. So there was obviously a lot of disordered diet culture language there present for me when I was growing up. I definitely watched a lot of those America's Next Top Model shows like Wisteria Lane, Desperate Housewives, all that kind of stuff. But it did start a lot younger. And I think it was more so to do with control for me and emotions and anxiety. It didn't actually start with the intention of losing weight. It was more so to do with yeah, control basically. So the way my eating disorder evolved over the years, it wasn't always to do with my body. A lot of the time it was to do with, so when I was binge eating, and so I had, just to kind of fill you in, I had bulimic behaviors with laxatives. I had anorexic behaviors where I was just starving myself, binge eating as well, and then purging with laxatives. And then towards the end was just more so orthorexic. So we went through a good scale of it all. But at the phase where I was binging and purging with laxatives, so kind of like trying to undo the binge with laxatives, that was actually in my mind. I thought I was being quite rational about it. It was because it was causing issues with my digestion. I was trying to figure out what was causing my IBS issues. And that's what was making me feel insecure in my body. So at the time, like I thought I was doing it for my health. I thought I was like trying to clear out, like I was given a prescription of constant laxatives by the doctor. And this is what's so harmful as well. There's no screening for eating disorders or anything like that. Um, so yeah, essentially there was parts along the journey where I was celebrated for being skinny. There was parts along the journey where I was bullied and for being skinny. So there was so many parts of my life where I was just, I didn't know who I could be. I didn't feel safe in my body. I didn't, yeah, I wanted to control it. I wanted to manipulate it. I wanted validation. I wanted, to be the pretty one. I wanted to be whatever. And then there was also elements of like fitness and health intertwined with all of that. So there was, I've got quite a mix of different things that I experienced and had to unpack and unlearn. But ultimately, I can understand it all for what it is, and it boils down to like feeling safe around foods, feeling safe in my body, not objectifying myself, right? Not looking at myself. This is a big thing with women is we objectify ourselves and we objectify others. We judge others. We judge ourselves. We look in the mirror and we criticize ourselves. And it's like, for a minute, can you stop looking at yourself and come back to being in your body, right? Your body is not this separate thing to you. You are actually your whole self. And like the amount of women that are disgusted by their body and how they talk to themselves is literally how they would talk to a piece of shit on the ground. And you would not say that to anyone else. But some of that is not even like what feels like it's conscious or like a choice, right? It feels like it's literally something that they're doing because of the anxiety around it all, because of the intrusive thoughts around it all. So if you are experiencing this, I really could not recommend getting support and reaching out. I've actually just created a relationship with food and body image course to help women with that because it is just so needed. It really, really is. And what you mentioned there with shame, so many women are going through it and not talking about it. I've even tried to be getting a community aspect going with my course, and so many women are just like, I just need to go through this by myself with your support. I can't actually open up to this, but anyone, I haven't told any of my friends and my family. And it breaks my heart because with shame, the more you internalize this, the more you keep this a secret, is the worse that this will be. It perpetuates shame, it keeps it alive. Whereas if we actually open up and support each other and lean on each other, like if you think about someone that opened up to you, you would literally not think twice. You would literally be like, oh my God, how can I help you? How can I support you? But with shame, it's like, I'm problematic. There's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of support, when it's just not true. So I like from the bottom of my heart, if this is you, do reach out, get the support that you need because it will literally change your life.
Yeah, I think we need more empowerment like this because when I can recall back to when I was struggling a lot with my body image, I speak about it a lot now, but that's because like I'm on the other side of it. But I know in that moment, it was all in myself. You know, when I was binging at night, that was so shameful. Like I didn't open up to anyone because I would be thinking, what will people be thinking about me doing that? Why? And I just didn't think people would understand that you can have a negative relationship with food like this. And I know even one of my best friends, like when she went through like competing for a show and like really struggled with her relationship with food and body, she was in the same position of like not wanting to speak about it at the moment. So yeah, it's definitely something women should be empowered, that there's actually way many people going through it and you're not on your own, and opening up with it and having support of people on the same journey, as well as somebody that's been through it all like yourself, being the mentor for them. And
Mm.
would you say you have like complete food freedom right now and you're content with your body, or do you still have days where you struggle with body image and your relationship with food?
So I don't struggle with my relationship with food, like literally ever. I would struggle with body image sometimes because, so I suppose I have a history of trauma, living parts of my life with CPTSD, sexual trauma as well. So there can be moments. Now I've gotten myself to a really good place. It doesn't pop up as much, but I can still deal with that sometimes. I've got the tools to bring myself out of it. It doesn't derail me. It doesn't completely take over my whole week, my whole month, my whole persona, but it's still moments, right? And we have to understand as well, like outside of all of that, like anything more distressing, we've got PMS, right? If you get the last week of your cycle every single month, you're going to have increased water retention. And in that moment, right, I could have some thoughts pop through of God, I feel really uncomfortable, or this doesn't look good on me, or oh God, so I'm in the sun quite a lot, so I wear a bikini quite a lot, and I'm just like, oh, I just feel quite puffy or whatever. And I have the choice and the ability now, because I've learned how to do so, of feeding those thoughts, right? So you can have a bad body image day. I can have a bad body image day if I feed those thoughts, right? I've learned the tools of how not to do that. So I'm not immune to having these thoughts for sure. I'm just like anybody else. But if I'm not aware of what's happening, if I'm not aware of what stage of my cycle I'm not aware of how safe I feel, even sometimes with my IBS, if I have an IBS flare and I'm at a swimming pool with loads of people, it doesn't feel great. But I have the choice in that moment to be compassionate with myself and to nourish and support myself, or to turn in on myself. And I'm just choosing not to do that anymore. But like that I said, that for someone listening to this, it might not feel like something you can just flick a switch and do. It is a journey. It is something that you have to practice, and really, really fully embody.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to self-awareness, right? The more aware and in tune you can be with your body, the more compassionate you can be, and knowing why things are happening so that you could be more understanding. Look, Orla, this was an amazing conversation, and we're going to wrap up before this goes on for like the whole day. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your knowledge and the tips that you've given. I'm going to go back and listen to it myself and take notes, because we touched on a lot. But just to wrap up, what are the three top tips you would give to women looking to just optimize their well-being and kind of get themselves away from being in that constant loop of hating their body and falling into the noise of diet culture? What are the top three things they can do to like literally thrive?
Hmm. So the first one is stress. Stress can drive everything from emotional eating to self-objectification and self-criticism, right? So, like I said earlier on, stress can be in multiple different sources. So go back and listen to that part and take notes and implement different aspects with your stress. Second one is be conscious of do an audit of what content you consume. And that is also your online, your friends, your work, your own thoughts, right? If the content you're consuming does not uplift you, does not help you with healing, does not support you, and actually stresses you out, makes you feel worse, makes you feel like you're like reinforces these beliefs that you're not good enough, or you're fat, or you're whatever belief that you have about yourself, like that is just keeping you stuck. So you've really, really got to change that. And third thing is, if you are feeling stuck, if you are feeling overwhelmed, work with someone, because I cannot tell you how quickly your life can transform. Literally, like you can have a transformation in your symptoms within 3 weeks, depending on what it is. So it's just, I want to empower women to not say stuck, because I think with women, we always think that we need to figure it out ourselves and we need to be independent and we need to just, I don't know, just that shame piece again, when in actual fact, you can let people help and let people in, and then you can do that yourself in the future. So yeah, those would be my 3 tips.
Yeah, they're amazing. And then lastly, where can people find you and what have you available other resources in terms of, getting the help or maybe just learning a little bit more about how their bodies work?
Yes, you can find me over on Instagram at the Health Hun. I've got my own podcast, the Health Hun podcast. I've got TikTok that I'm very sporadic at using, so we're trying. And then I've got my coaching services. So I've got, as I mentioned, the How to Heal Your Relationship with Food course, which is all about your relationship with food and body image, like unlearning the bullshit, relearning what matters, helping you tune in with your nervous system, binge eating, emotional eating, body image as well. And then I have coaching. So I have 2 types of coaching. One is centered around trauma, the nervous system healing, and one is centered around nutrition, health, hormones, gut health, disordered eating, body image, all of that. So there is definitely an overlap with all of them. So if anyone's unsure of like what's for you, there is chemistry calls that I offer for, yeah, just a quick chat just to see where you're at and what is in alignment with you as well.
Okay, amazing. Thank you again so much.